So as we move on from images, the next most important meta kind of a consideration that your unknown potential future users are going to have are actually those font faces. It's going to be the way it is that your text is portrayed to the user. If you think about it, the font face tells you a little bit about what to expect, right? So if I see a typewriter font face, I know they're trying to tell me something is, potentially old-timey and kind of, has that vintage quality to it. If I see something written in Comic Sans, that lets me know that they either have no taste, or they want me to think of things like the way that Charlie Brown in a comic strip would talk to me. That very, very closely represents the way that Comic Sans was actually meant to be developed. If I see cursive, I know that my web property wants to give me the feeling that things here are, fancy, or something along those lines. So font faces communicate a lot of that to your user. The way we do that is with the font family property. Now, there's a lot of different ways to look at the way we would use font and font family, and this is something that I have referenced in a previous resource, but this time it shows up on page 154, and I just wanted to get a little bit deeper into it now that we are being more complex with our CSS, and we are using these font families to convey meaning to our users. Now, all of this is certainly true. Here in figure 5.15, all of these things are true. We can use, a serif font. We can use a sans serif font, monospace, cursive, etc. But again, these are based on your device. So things like Verdana, Tahoma, Georgia are, on most computers and are good on most computer monitors, but it's imperfect. If I'm on an iPad, that's one thing. If I'm on an ancient Windows machine, that's another. If if I have a huge amount of fonts installed on my machine versus a very, very few fonts installed on my machine. Let's just show you first and foremost what that would look like in your CSS. So I would declare a font family as a property, and I would give a value to it, just in case this still is on page 154. So I declare that's my, here's my properties and values, and these go to my selector. So my selector is paragraph. My font family is going to be Verdana, Arial, or Sans Serif. What this essentially means is use the first one, Verdana. If you don't have Verdana, go to Arial. If you don't have Arial, just go to something that's sans serif, so it doesn't have feet. That's fine and that's good. That is essentially giving yourself kind of an old version of insurance. That's what that's saying is, hey, look, use your device, use Verdana first. Shit, you don't have Verdana? Crap. Go to Arial. Don't have Arial? Use sans serif, something without feet. But what I can tell you is we can do better. By its very nature, I can assume that because my unknown potential future client has stumbled here onto my web property, that means they have access to the web. If they have access to the web, and we scroll down, 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 here we have this idea of the Google Fonts API. An API is an application programming interface. If you were to follow through with developers.google.com/web fonts, etc., what you would be brought to is this page. And it gives you an example of how to use Google Fonts API on your site. What's happening here is at the very top, they're saying you have two different methods of including the Google Fonts API on your website. The first of them is here inside of your HTML. And what you'd be able to do is, just like you brought in a style sheet, we could bring in here the Google Fonts API instead. So we would be able to go to fonts.google.com, yada, 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 and we would get a font family, and that one here for this example is Tangerine. This is what Tangerine looks like. that's a far better looking font than just Times New Roman would be on a web page. That's actually done by importing that CSS directly onto your HTML. The problem with importing into a single HTML page is that it's not going to be consistent across the entirety of your web property. So that means as I go from home to contact, I'm going to lose the ability to use Tangerine simply by calling it by name. What's even better would be, as we can see down here, we would bring the Google Fonts API font into our CSS instead. This example is by bringing it into our CSS. What essentially we would do is include that link. So whatever all of this is, all of that comes into the very, very first line of our CSS. So on line number 1 in style.css, you would include this link. And heretofore, forevermore, inside of your CSS, anytime you wanted to, so whatever the name of your CSS selector is, so this could be body, this could be hero, this could be whatever you want, you would simply refer to that font name by its font name. So in this example, we would simply call it Tangerine. And from there on out, whenever I reference Tangerine, it simply works. We're going to build an in-class activity around using the Google API, and it really it takes this tremendous amount of ambiguity away from you. You can be assured that the way you developed your page is going to be seen by the user in the way that you expected because of the Google Fonts API.